AITA for refusing to sell my house to restore Mike's dignity after he bankrupted himself. I'm Emily Carter. I'm 32. I live alone in a modest two-bedroom house I bought after nearly a decade of grinding, working full-time at a public elementary school, tutoring on weekends, living on cheap food and cheaper rent, saying no to trips, birthdays, and weddings. I made every sacrifice for stability. My family never really respected that. I was always fine. So they poured their attention elsewhere, mostly into Mike, my youngest brother. Mike's 30 now. He's been babied his whole life. I never worked for more than 6 months, but I always had big dreams of opening a lounge, launching a clothing brand, and running a food truck. Every time he failed, my parents bailed him out. They called it supporting his ambition. I called it delusion. Last year, Mike borrowed tens of thousands from friends and investors to open a fancy cafe downtown. He blew it all: poor management, shady partners, and, honestly, his complete lack of discipline. The cafe shut down within 8 months. 2 weeks ago, my mom called me out of the blue. No greetings, no check-in, just this: Emily, you need to sell your house. Mike's reputation is in shambles. People are talking. I thought it was satire, but she wasn't joking. She said if I truly cared about family, I'd sell the house and use the money to help him rebuild properly this time. I told her no, not just no, hell no. I reminded her that no one helped me buy this house. I worked through migraines, taught through panic attacks, and skipped meals to save for it. I said Mike needs to live with the consequences of his choices. For once, she lost it. They called me heartless. I said I was jealous of Mike's entrepreneurial spirit. Said a real family steps up when one of their own is down. My dad hasn't spoken to me since. My brother Ryan texted me to let it go. Sarah sent a voice note about peace in the family, but none of them offered money, just guilt. Mike, he sent me a Venmo request $82. 000, no message, just a goddamn number. Now I'm sitting here wondering if I am the bad one. I'm not trying to see him suffer, but why is my stability always the backup plan for his chaos? The house was never just a house. When I signed the closing papers 3 years ago, sitting across from a tired real estate agent and a stack of legal forms, I cried, not out of joy, not really. I cried because I had made it out of the cycle of relying on landlords who could raise the rent on a whim, out of being the extra daughter crashing in Sarah's guest room, out of being treated like a placeholder in my own damn life. That house meant independence. I owned everything, every scratch on the floor and every uneven cabinet hinge. It was messy, small, and sometimes cold in the winter. But it was mine. No one could take it from me, at least. That's what I thought. I didn't tell many people when I bought it. I knew what would happen. Sarah would have asked how much I was making now, passive-aggressively suggesting I must be doing well while reminding me she and her husband were remodeling their second home. Ryan would have joked about me finally moving up like he didn't crash on my couch after his second divorce. And Mike would have shown up with a duffel bag and temporary plans to crash for just a few nights. So I kept it quiet. I painted the walls myself. I dragged furniture off Craigslist. I installed shelves while watching YouTube tutorials. I built it the way I built my life alone. That's what made my mother's demands sting so much. She didn't ask. She expected it as if the house was a family asset, not a personal milestone. It was as if everything I had worked for was on the table anytime her favorite child stumbled. And he always stumbled. Mike didn't just fail at the cafe. He blew through investor money on custom furniture, luxury espresso machines, and social media influencers who ghosted him after launch week. He skipped payments on equipment, didn't pay his baristas, and blamed the economy for everything. And now that it's collapsed, he wants a reset. And I'm supposed to be the reset button. The worst part? My mother sees no problem with that, in her eyes. My success is always temporary, meant to be sacrificed for the greater good of the family. But let's be honest. Family in her world means Mike. That house is the only place I don't feel like an afterthought in the world. And if that makes me selfish, fine. I'd rather be selfish than invisible. They showed up without warning. It was a Saturday morning. I was still in pajamas, hair in a bun, trying to coax my ancient coffee maker into one more cup. The knock on the door startled me. But what froze me was seeing my parents and Mike standing on my porch like this was normal, like I had invited them. I opened the door with a crack. My mom didn't even wait for a hello. "We've come to talk sense into you." No small talk, no warmth, just that tone was sharp, rehearsed, and soaked in disappointment. I didn't invite them in. I stood at the door, arms crossed, but that didn't stop them. My dad brushed past me with a muttered, "We're family." Mike followed, eyes on the floor like some wounded soldier. My mom walked in last as if she owned the place. I should have kicked them out, but I froze again. They sat down like this was some intervention. My mother pulled out a manila folder and started explaining the new plan. They'd talked to a few silent backers who would reconsider supporting Mike if he could relaunch with a proper image, a bigger, cleaner location, trendier menu, more PR. And the key to that, we need you to sell the house and contribute. It's the least you can do. She said it like I owed them. For example, in my life, there was a loan from the family that was now due. I told her no again, calm but firm, and that's when things got ugly. She accused me of being selfish and said I didn't care about my brother's future. My dad nodded, silent as ever, like this was all beneath him. Mike finally spoke. "It's not like you have a family or anything. You live alone. What do you even need a house for?" That did it. That pushed me from frozen to furious. I told them to leave. My voice cracked, but it was loud. I said this house wasn't just a building. It was proof that I mattered, that I built something by myself, that I existed outside of their dysfunction. My mom scoffed. My dad shrugged. Mike looked genuinely confused. As they left, my mom turned to me and said, "You'll regret this when he's successful. And you're still bitter and alone." Then they walked out just as entitled as when they came in. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing the entire scene like some broken film reel. My mother's voice echoed, "You'll regret this." Mike's words, "You don't even have a family." That one hit harder than I expected. Not because it was true, but because that's how they see me. To them, I'm just a single woman with no husband, kids, or absolute obligations, a spare part, a resource, a piggy bank in human form. That's the real reason they think my house is expendable. Not because they're desperate, but because they believe my life doesn't matter as much. Because I don't have someone depending on me. Because, to them, I've always been the one who has less to lose, but I do have something to lose myself. I've spent most of my life stepping up. I was the one who stayed behind when my siblings moved out. I helped care for my grandmother when she was dying. I drove Dad to his physical therapy appointments after his surgery while Mike was out partying. I lent Ryan money after his second divorce. I helped Lily get her first apartment. I never asked for anything in return, not even recognition. They never noticed how much I was bleeding under the weight of being the reliable one. And now, when I finally have something for myself, they want to rip it away. For Mike. Again, no one asked how I was doing. No one asked if I was okay working 2 jobs. No one cared that I went years without new clothes, vacations, or even decent sleep to afford that down payment. They saw the result. A house. And thought, great. She has something we can take. It's not about the money. It never was. It's about how easily they believe I should disappear for someone else's sake. How conditioned they are to think my needs come last. But not this time. That night. I wrote a message in the family group chat. I didn't yell. I didn't explain. I said, my house is not for sale. My life is not your backup plan. Please don't show up again without my permission. Then, I muted the thread. I expected anger. What I didn't expect was silence. No reply. Not even from Sarah. That silence for once. It felt like peace. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, playing the entire scene over in my head like some broken film reel. My mother's voice echoed, "You'll regret this." Mike's words, "You don't even have a family." That one hit harder than I expected, not because it was true, but because that's how they see me. To them, I'm just a single woman with no husband, kids, or absolute obligations, a spare part, a resource, a piggy bank in human form. That's the real reason they think my house is expendable. Not because they're desperate, but because they believe my life doesn't matter as much. Because I don't have someone depending on me. Because, to them, I've always been the one who has less to lose. But I do have something to lose myself. I've spent most of my life stepping up. I was the one who stayed behind when my siblings moved out. I helped care for my grandmother when she was dying. I drove Dad to his physical therapy appointments after his surgery while Mike was out partying. I lent Ryan money after his second divorce. I helped Lily get her first apartment. I never asked for anything in return. Not even recognition. They never noticed how much I was bleeding under the weight of being the reliable one. And now, when I finally have something for myself, they want to rip it away. For Mike. Again. No one asked how I was doing. No one asked if I was okay working 2 jobs. No one cared that I went years without new clothes, vacations, or even decent sleep to afford that down payment. They saw the result. A house. And thought, great, she has something we can take. It's not about the money. It never was. It's about how easily they believe I should disappear for someone else's sake. How conditioned they are to think my needs come last. But not this time. That night, I wrote a message in the family group chat. I didn't yell. I didn't explain. I said, my house is not for sale. My life is not your backup plan. Please don't show up again without my permission. Then, I muted the thread. I expected anger. What I didn't expect was silence. No reply. Not even from Sarah. That silence for once. It felt like peace. 2 days later, I got a call from Hannah. She used to work with Mike at the cafe. We'd only met once. Briefly. During the soft opening, she was polite and kept to herself. I didn't expect her to reach out, but when I saw her name flash on my phone, something told me to answer. Emily said, I think you deserve to know what happened. Then she told me everything. Mike wasn't just a bad businessman. He was reckless. He spent thousands on custom marble counters, imported light fixtures, and a logo rebrand 3 times. He threw money at launch parties and influencer brunches but couldn't pay staff on time. He skipped vendor bills, ignored permits, and told everyone it was fine because my family's got me. That's what he said, repeatedly. To staff, to investors, even to Hannah, it's okay. He'd shrug. Worst case, my sister will help me out. She's got a house. My stomach turned when I heard that. All this time, I thought they just assumed I'd help. Turns out, Mike had already promised my support like I was some emergency fund he was entitled to. Hannah said when things got bad, he started showing up late or not at all. One time, he skipped payroll to buy a designer watch for morale. Employees began quitting one by one when the cafe shut down. Suppliers threatened lawsuits, and staff filed wage claims. I thanked her for the call. She apologized and said she felt guilty keeping it in. But I was grateful. It confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't about saving Mike. This was about covering up how far he'd fallen. My parents didn't want to admit it. They still believed he had potential and needed only one more chance. They didn't want to see the truth that he wasn't a victim of circumstance. He was the architect of his failure. And I was supposed to pay for it. Not anymore. I opened my laptop and blocked Mike on every platform. Then, I removed myself from the family group chat entirely. I didn't need the silence. I needed distance. I had tried being the bigger person for years, but all it did was make me smaller in their eyes. Like I could be stretched thinner and thinner until I disappeared. No more. I sold the house last month. Not because I gave in, not for Mike, not for my parents. I sold it because I was ready to leave everything tied to them behind. The house had become a battleground. Every corner held echoes of arguments I never wanted to have. The bedroom where I once felt safe now reminded me of whispered guilt trips and slammed doors. Even my kitchen, once a place of quiet pride, felt tainted, like it had been invaded without my consent. So, I listed it quietly. No family notice, no announcement on social media. It is just a decision between me and my real estate agent. The market was good, and I made a decent profit, enough to start over somewhere no one knew my name or my history. I found a small apartment 2 towns over. It's nothing flashy. It's just a 1-bedroom with good lighting and a solid lock on the door. But it's mine, and more importantly, it's free of them. The day I moved, I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear their reactions. Not the guilt, not the confusion, not the entitlement, but somehow, word got out anyway. A week later, Ryan called. I let it ring out. Then came a text. "Did you sell the house without even telling us?" I stared at that message for a while. Us. Since when did they think they had a stake in my home? Then Sarah emailed me. It was long, full of family nostalgia, thinly veiled judgment, and a closing line that made me laugh out loud. "I hope you're not doing this out of spite." Spite, no. If anything. I waited too long. Mike never reached out, not directly, but mutual friends told me he was shocked and hurt that I could walk away from the family like that. He said someone. I didn't think she'd do it. They never think people like me will walk away. The dependable one. The fixer. The quiet giver. The one who absorbs everything so others don't have to. But we do, sometimes. We sell the house, sometimes. We leave the chat, sometimes. We disappear. Not to punish, but to survive. And I finally feel like I'm living on my terms for the first time in years. I thought the distance would bring peace. And in some ways, it did. My new apartment is quiet. No surprise visits. No guilt-tripping voicemails. No one treating my life like a donation box. I cook dinner in silence. I sleep through the night. I don't jump at every notification. I wonder what they want now. But sometimes I miss the noise, not the drama, not the manipulation, but the illusion of family, the small moments. Like Sunday pancakes at Sarah's or laughing at old movies with Ryan. I miss the parts that felt real. Even if they were surrounded by hurt parts, there's an ache that comes with choosing yourself. No one tells you about that part. They talk about strength, about empowerment, about breaking cycles, but they don't talk about the emptiness that follows. Because I didn't just walk away from a house. I walked away from the role I was born into. The fixer, the helper, the one who always stepped in when things fell apart. And when I stopped playing that part, it was like the rest of the cast stopped recognizing me, sometimes. I wonder if I overreacted. Suppose I tried harder to make them see my side if blocking Mike was too harsh, if cutting off contact was selfish. Suppose silence was just another form of punishment. But then I remember the way my mom looked at me that day in my living room. Like I was a disappointment for choosing to protect myself. I remember Mike's Venmo request, $82. 000. No explanation. Just expectation. I remember the years no one asked how I was doing. Only what I could give. I remember being loved for my usefulness, not for being me. So yes, I walked away, but not because I stopped caring. because they never did. And now I sit here, typing this out for strangers on the internet, trying to make sense of something that still stings more than I want to admit. AITA for choosing myself, even if it means losing everyone else.